Do you love complex strategy games but hate trying to decipher giant rule books? Do you prefer a crash course in a game and then jump right in to try to feel your way through that first game? Have you been Googling symptoms for ADD? Well, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Board Game Nation. My name is Gary Blevins. Thank you so much for watching. Today we're exploring one of my favorite games, Axis and Allies 1942 2nd Edition. In this video, we're going to make an attempt to cover all of the rules in one giant example. That's right, we've combed the 31-page rulebook and the various corrections to create an example that hopes to touch on every rule for this very complex game. Obviously, we're going to go through this pretty fast, so when you've got questions, you can jump over to our complete How to Play video and look in the description for the chapter that you're looking to learn about. You can watch it all the way through, or you can watch it piece by piece. You'll find detailed explanations and lots of smaller examples. You'll find a link to that video in the description below. If you're looking for information about what comes inside the box, we've got you covered. We've created a detailed unboxing video with close-ups of the map and all the pieces, and again, you'll find that linked in the description below. Before we jump into this crazy example, real quick, if this is your first time here, at Board Game Nation we do unboxings, how-tos, and strategy videos for great games like this one, but we also do a travel show that focuses on your favorite board game stores. So if you like anything having to do with tabletop gaming, this is a place for you. Please take a second and hit that subscribe button for us, and thanks. All right, let's make it hot. All right, here's the situation. This is a standard victory condition game in round 10, and the US is poised to win the game for the Allies. They have 9 of the 13 victory cities, and they only need 1 more to win. The Allies hold DC, San Francisco, Honolulu, London, Berlin, Calcutta, Moscow, and Leningrad. They've captured Paris and Shanghai. But the Axis are still holding on to Rome, Paris, Manila, and Tokyo. This example is going to end up with some unusual strategic choices, okay? And don't ask me how the board ended up this way. War is crazy. If the Americans can take Tokyo on their turn, that will be the end of a complete round of play, and the Allies will win the game. We're going to go through the Americans' complete turn, start to finish, and try to touch on every rule in the game. Here goes. Holy buckets. This is a mess. It looks like the Japanese just finished their turn and have done their best to provide protection for Tokyo and Manila before they collected the 31 IPCs. After capturing Berlin on the last turn, the Americans have a whopping 80 IPCs and are ready to go. The Germans have been busy doing industrial bombing raids on the Americans, so the industrial complex in DC is badly damaged, and the factory in the western United States also has a bit of damage, but only 4 points worth. The industrial complex in Alaska, while it can only produce 2 units per turn, is undamaged. The Americans purchase a bomber, 1 fighter, an aircraft carrier, 1 destroyer, 2 transports, 2 infantry, 1 artillery, and 1 tank for a total cost of 74 IPCs. They also decide to repair 2 of the 4 points of damage to the industrial complex in the western United States for a final cost of 76 IPCs. The Americans remove 2 counters from the damage of the industrial complex in western United States and place their units in the mobilization zone. Now it's time to mix it up. The Americans are going to be attacking Japanese units, German units, and some places with mixed units. The goal is to take Tokyo and also to take out as many units as possible that might be able to reinforce Tokyo should the battle go ill. Let's start by placing markers everywhere the Americans are going to attack. So the Americans are going to attack here, 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 a bombing raid on the industrial complex, here, 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 and here. And that should be all the Americans' combat moves. I think that'll be enough. So who's attacking where? Let's start with the mainland attacks. A tank in Yunnan is going to blitz up and liberate Sichuan and then move back to Yunnan. The other tank is going to blitz through French Indochina and Malala. They take all 3 territories uncontested. We change the control markers and adjust the national production chart. The 2 infantry and the artillery are going to attack Kwangtung, while 1 bomber from India is going to do an industrial bombing raid at the same time. The fighter from Yunnan is going to join the other bomber from India on an attack in Manchuria, with 2 infantry from Guangzhou. The tank in Xinjiang is going to blitz through Anhui and also attack Manchuria. The Americans take Anhui, change the markers, and adjust the national production chart. Now, out to sea. The troops in Alaska want in on the action. The Americans can almost completely ignore the subs in Sea Zones 63 and 64 because they aren't accompanied by any enemy surface warships. So, 2 transports load 2 infantry and 2 artillery and move into Sea Zone 62. Offloading 1 transport into Manchuria and the other into Japan, both for amphibious assaults. They then move the cruisers from 64 into 62 and plan to perform one offshore bombardment in each assault. That's very sneaky. The last transport wants to liberate the industrial complex in the Soviet Far East for our Russian friends. They load the transport with a guy and an artillery and move over to 63, but the transport can't attack by itself while there's a sub there. So the destroyer from 57 comes up to offer cover. The transport lands unopposed and liberates the territory for the Russians. We remove the Japanese marker and give the Russians a pay raise. Plus, the Russians will be able to use this complex on their very next turn. Do svidaniya. All right, let's take on the big one, the attack on Japan. We need to be clear about which units are going where, and the board's getting a little crowded. We need to declare the units that are trying to clear C-Zone 60 first. So, starting with the air units, the Americans are going to send 4 fighters from the carriers in 59. Next, sea units. From 59, the battleship and the cruiser, and all 6 destroyers. They'll leave the carriers out of this one. From 57, all 6 subs are heading in, through 59 to avoid the destroyer in 58. From 52, the battleship and the cruiser are going. And last but not least, the 11 transports will pick up the 11 infantry on Wake Island, move to 59 and pick up the 5 artillery and 6 tanks and move into the big party in C-Zone 60. The Americans are hoping that that'll be enough to clear the C-Zone of enemy units so that they can storm the beaches with all those land units. But now we have to see what else will be joining these land units, if they make it. We have the units from the big stack of transports, but we also have the sneaky guys from Alaska. Now, for air support. From Midway, we'll bring all 6 bombers, and the 2 fighters from the carriers in 59. That should be it for the big battle. Let's see how the Americans plan to take out the potential reinforcements. First, the German fleet in 61. The Americans are hoping to strand those troops on Formosa. They send 2 subs from 51, and the 2 bombers from western United States will take the red eye to make it to this flight. The Japanese transports in 48 might be a problem later, so the Americans will send the sub from 50 while the sub from 44 slides under the battleship in 49. Knowing that the fighter can't hit the subs, the Americans only have to get 1 hit to sink that carrier and win the battle to destroy those transports. The 3 cruisers in 50 are clearly unacceptable. The Americans send the cruiser and 1 destroyer from 44 and a sub from 52 to take those on. While they're at it, they'll load the transport in 53 with the infantry from Hawaii, travel through 52, and try to take the unoccupied Caroline Islands in an amphibious assault. The Americans still have the sub in 51. They'll leave it there and try to take out the destroyer. Let's take a second and make sure that all of our air units have a safe place to land. The bomber on the strategic bombing raid in Kwangtung has 3 moves left. It can make it back to India or a few other places. The bomber and the fighter in Manchuria have 1 move left and can land in a couple of other friendly places, but they just took on WWII, so they can't land there. The bombers in 61 have 1 move left and can land in Guangzhou or Yunnan. The 4 fighters in 60 will have 3 moves left, so they can go back to the carriers, or they can land on the UK carrier or Burratia. The 2 fighters in Japan will have 2 moves left, and they'll have the same options. And the 6 bombers in Midway only have 2 moves left, so they'll have to land in Burratia. Perfect. That should be all the combat moves. In the words of Optimus Prime, let's roll. When you have multiple types of battles, they have to be resolved in this order: strategic bombing raids, amphibious assaults, and then general combat. So, first up is the strategic bombing raid in Kwangtung. The industrial complex gets to defend itself, needing a 1 to hit and destroy the bomber before it can make its run. A miss. The bomber gets to proceed with its attack, and it does 5 damage. The production capability of Kwangtung is only 2, so we'll place the maximum amount of damage markers on the complex, or 4. That's it for bombing runs this turn. Now, amphibious assaults. We have 1 in Manchuria, 1 in the Caroline Islands, and of course, Japan. Let's start in the Caroline Islands. The Americans have to clear 50 of the hostile surface warships before they can take control of the undefended islands. Over to the battle board, placing each unit in the proper lane. The attackers have a sub, and the defenders have no destroyer. So the attacker rolls first for the surprise attack, looking for a 2 or less. A hit. The defender removes 1 of the cruisers. The destroyer fires and misses, and the cruiser needs a 3 or less, but it also misses. The defenders have 2 cruisers that shoot back, both hit. The Americans remove the sub and the destroyer. The Japanese didn't lose any units after the sub attack. The Americans decide not to risk it against the 2 cruisers and decide to retreat. The cruiser came from 44 and the transport from 52, so they can retreat to either one. The Americans decide to move the retreating units to C-Zone 52. Bad news for the infantry on the retreating transport, though. He won't be able to offload because the transport did combat this turn. Our next amphibious assault is a bit more involved. We've got everyone on the battle board. The Japanese get to fire at the incoming aircraft with their AA gun. The Americans are coming with 2 air units, so the Japanese roll 1 die for each, needing a 1 to hit. 1 hit. The Americans choose to lose the fighter. Next, the cruiser in 62 is going to take a shot at the land troops. It needs a 3 or less to hit. A hit. The Japanese move 1 infantry to the casualty zone. The Americans are attacking with 3 infantry, 1 artillery, and the remaining bomber. So the 2 infantry needing a 1, both miss. 1 hit. A miss. And now the bomber looking for a 4 or less. A miss. So the Japanese take the 1 hit on the AA gun. All 3 Japanese infantry fire back and get 3 hits. The Americans take all 3 hits on the infantry. 1 hit on the infantry that came from the beach, and the other 2 on the infantry that came from Krangsu. The Japanese heads back to the box. Now this has been more expensive than the Americans were bargaining for, but they know that only the units that attack from the land and the air units can retreat. They press the attack in hopes of saving that artillery in its do-or-die situation. The American artillery fires, and it misses. The tank at a 3, 1 hit, and the bomber at a 4 for a 2nd hit. The defenders move the last 2 infantry to the casualty zone. But before they go, they fire back. 2 more hits. More bad news for the Americans. They must have a land unit in order to capture the territory, but they've only got 2 left. So they assign 1 hit to the artillery and the other to the bomber, leaving the tank to take the territory and the industrial complex. The Americans won't be able to build there this turn, but they can build there next turn. We move the units back to the map, place the American control marker, and adjust the national production chart. Okay, now I know we're supposed to do the amphibious assault on Japan, but we're not going to do that. I know that's what the rules say, but this game is supposed to be fun. If the Americans take Tokyo, none of the other moves matter. They'd ruin the suspense. So we're going to do all the other combat moves first. This is the benefit of playing in person versus playing online. You can add house rules to keep the game fresh and fun. What I want you to see here is that in casual play, if you find a way for you and your buddies to have more fun, you should absolutely do that thing. You're not 1,000% tied to the rules. Have some fun with it. So, skipping Japan for now, let's jump back into the action. Once you've knocked out the strategic bombing raids and the amphibious assaults, you move on to general combat. This can be sea or land combat and can be done in any order that the attacker chooses. Let's start in Sea Zone 48. The Americans want to take out those transports and lock the troops onto the Philippine Islands. We've got everyone on the battle board, but because the Japanese don't have a destroyer present, the defending fighter isn't going to be able to hit the attacking subs. Again, no destroyer, so the subs get to use its surprise attack ability. They fire their torpedoes. 1 hit. And that's all they needed. The carrier is destroyed and won't get to fire back, and the fighter can't hit a sub. So we skip all the way to step 7 and conclude combat. With the carrier destroyed and the fighter unable to hit the subs, the transports are undefended and in a hostile sea zone, and therefore destroyed. The fighter has 1 move to find safety, and it heads to the Philippines. Next, we've got a little battle in 51. The sub started its turn in a hostile sea zone, and it decided to stay put and attack the destroyer. A pretty easy one. The destroyer cancels all the abilities of the sub. The sub fires and needs a 2 or less. A hit. The destroyer moves to the casualty zone. The destroyer fires back, also needing a 2, and he also hits. The sub heads to the depths. The destroyer back to the box. Now, Sea Zone 51 is friendly to anyone that wants to pass through. On to Sea Zone 61. The Americans are trying to sink the transport in order to strand the land units on the island of Formosa. We get everyone over to the battle board. The Americans are attacking with 2 subs, but the Germans have a destroyer. So the sub will fire with all the other attacking units. However, the Germans have a sub and the Americans have no destroyer. So the defending sub gets a surprise attack, but the sub only defends on a 1, a miss. The American subs fire, a hit. The bombers fire, both hit. These hits came from air units, so they can't be assigned to a sub. The Germans take 1 hit on the battleship and the other to their destroyer. The subs have fired already, so on to the destroyer, a miss, and the battleship for a 4 or less, 1 hit. The Americans take the hit on a sub. The destroyer sinks. So far, so good for the Americans. They press the attack. Now we've got a sub on both sides and no destroyers. They both have to choose between submerging and leaving the battle or their surprise attack. The attacker has to choose first, and they plan to perform their surprise attack. The Germans don't care for these odds anymore, and the sub submerges and returns to the map. The American subs fire at the battleship and 1 hit. The battleship is removed from the game. Again, we have an undefended transport in a hostile sea zone. Even though the sub is still in the area, it has submerged and can't help the transports anymore. They're going down with the battleship. One more land battle in China, the invasion of Guangdong. We move the units to the battle board, giving the artillery bonus to one of the infantry. The infantry shoots, needing a 1, a miss. The infantry and the artillery needing a 2, 2 hits. The Japanese send 2 of their infantry units to the casualty zone. All 5 fire back. 2 hits. The Americans take the hits on the 2 infantry units. Japanese remove their casualties. Well, that didn't go so great. They'll retreat and say something about the better part of valor as they scurry back to Yunnan. Note that the abject failure of this attack had no effect on the damaged industrial complex. I think that's it. We're ready for the big one. We've got to do the sea combat first. Let's see how it goes. Okay, we've got a lot going on here. The fighters on the Japanese carrier will get to join in the defense, as will the German destroyer. And the battleships will take 2 hits to sink. Let's get them all in place. Notice that we put these units on the board, but they aren't part of the combat. Their fate will be decided by the outcome of this battle. Both sides have subs and destroyers, so nothing to do in step 2. All right, let's do it. The Americans have 6 subs and 6 destroyers. Both attack at a 2, but the subs can't hit air units, so we'll have to roll them separately. First, the subs. 2 hits. Now, the destroyers. 2 more hits. Next, the Americans have the cruiser and the fighters all at a 3. The Americans have a destroyer, so these fighters can hit subs, meaning that we can roll all of these at the same time. 3 hits. Now, the 2 battleships at a 4 or less. Both miss. Total damage is 5 hits that can go anywhere and 2 that cannot go to fighters. The Japanese consult with the German player and they agree to take 1 hit on the battleship, 4 on the subs, and the last 2 on the Japanese destroyers. Time to return the favor. The subs defended a 1, 1 hit. The destroyers and carriers all defended a 2, 2 hits. The cruiser at a 3, 1 hit. The battleship and the fighter at a 4, 2 more hits. Total damage, 5 hits for anything and 1 that can't go to fighters. The Americans take 1 hit on each of the battleships and the remaining 4 hits on destroyers. The Japanese collect their fallen. The Americans are full speed ahead. The German destroyer still negates the American sub-abilities. The 6 subs fire, 1 hit. The 2 destroyers fire, both miss. The cruiser and the 4 fighters at a 3, 3 hits. And the battleships at a 4, 1 hit. Total carnage, 4 general hits and 1 sub-hit. Again, the Japanese and German players confer and realize that's a lot of hits. The only thing that will remain is 1 Japanese fighter. But they won't go down without a fight. The German destroyer and carrier defended a 2, 1 hit. The cruiser at a 3, 1 hit. The battleship and the fighters at a 4, 3 hits, for a total of 5 hits. The Americans will take the hit on the submarines. The Japanese clear their casualties. Now that all the enemy ships have been destroyed, the American submarine will not get to fire because subs can't hit air units. As a result, we skip to step 3. The 2 destroyers fire, needing a 2 or less. 1 hit. That'll be enough for this battle. The Japanese move their fighter to the casualty zone and prepare to return fire. 1 hit. Remember, that hit can't be taken on the submarine, so the Americans will take that last hit on one of the remaining destroyers. And the Japanese put their fighter back in the box. That turns the sea zone from hostile to friendly, meaning that the transports can now offload those troops onto mainland Japan and attack. Getting the land combat set up, we placed the AA guns off to the right. Plus, while the battleships and the cruisers in 60 were involved in sea combat, the cruiser from 62 was not and will get to fire once. The Americans are attacking with 6 bombers and 2 fighters. The Japanese have 2 AA guns, so they'll roll 3 dice for each AA gun looking for hits on a roll of a 1. 1 hit. The Americans remove 1 fighter from the battle. The cruiser gets to fire its 1 shot, looking for a 3. A hit. The Americans have 11 infantry, but 5 of them get the assist from the 5 artillery units. So, we have 6 infantry looking for a roll of a 1. 1 hit. Now the artillery and the assisted infantry looking for 2s. 3 hits. The 6 tank and the fighter all hit at a 3. 3 more hits. And now 6 bombers at a 4. 4 hits, for a total of 12 hits. The Japanese move the 2 AA guns, the German bomber, and 9 infantry to the casualty zone. The German bomber returns fire at a 1, a miss. The 16 infantry and the 6 artillery fire back, needing a 2. The Japanese roll every die they own and get 8 hits. The tank needs a 3, a hit, and finally, the fighters need a 4, 1 hit, for a total of 10 hits. The Americans remove 10 infantry. The Germans and the Japanese clear the field. Because the land units all came from the sea, it's do or die from them. The air units could bug out, but that wouldn't be very nice to those land units. So the Americans press the attack and jump back to step 3. The Americans have 3 infantry and 5 artillery, all at a 2. 2 hits. Now, the 6 tanks and the fighter, all at a 3. 4 hits. The 6 bombers at a 4. 4 hits. For a total of 10 hits. The Japanese move 8 infantry and 2 artillery to the casualty zone. The Japanese fire back and get 8 hits. Wow. The tank fires, gets another hit, and the fighters, 2 more hits, for a total of 10 hits. The Americans lose all of their infantry, all the artillery, along with 2 tanks. The defenders remove their casualties. While the Americans are running low on land units, they will press the attack. The tanks and the fighter fire together and get 3 hits. The bombers, 3 more hits, for a total of 6 hits. And that is all the Japanese units, but before they go, they will get to fire back. The artillery gets 2 hits, the tank, another hit, and the fighters, 2 more hits, for a total of 5 hits. This puts the Americans in a tough spot. They need to hold a land unit so that they can actually take the territory, so they'll hold on to a tank and instead lose 3 tanks, a fighter, and a bomber. The Japanese head back to the box, and the Americans head back to the board. With the last remaining tank, the Americans have taken Tokyo, a national capital. The Japanese must give their 31 IPCs to the Americans immediately. Until Tokyo is liberated by the Japanese or the Germans, they will not be able to collect income or build units. This is all bad. Now it's time for the non-combat phase. We've got to land air units that were in combat, and we can move units that weren't involved in combat. Let's start with a bomber in Kwangtung. It's got 3 movements left. It'll land in Sinkiang. The bombers in 61 will use the little scoot through at the bottom there to get to Yunnan. The bombers in Japan will use their 2 remaining movements to land in Buraitia. As for the fighters in 60, we'll break these up and send them to a couple different places. The first, to the friendly carrier in 62. The second, back to the carriers in 59. And the third will fly over to 65 to meet a carrier later. The last one will stay put. We've got 2 fighters in Western Canada. One will fly out to 65. The other will flip to the other side of the map with the AA gun. The AA gun will end in Eastern Canada, and the fighter will land in Central United States. Because the Germans control Central America, the Americans can't pass through the Panama Canal. Back to the Pacific. We need to break up these carriers in 59. They're going to go to a couple of different places. The first will move over to 60 to catch that fighter before it splashes in the ocean. The second will move over to 56, joined by the destroyer. And the last carrier in 59 will stay put. Lastly, we'll move one of the infantry from Kiangsu over to Anhui. And that should be all the non-combat. On to mobilize units. The fighters in 65 will be caught by the American carrier being built in the industrial complex in Alaska, and also joined by a destroyer. That's the 2 units that can be built there. Moving to the western United States, we can build 8 units here. We'll put 2 infantry, 1 artillery, and a tank. We'll also place the bomber here. The American fighter will be placed on the carrier in 56, and the last 2 transports will be built in 56 as well. Finally, the Americans collect their income. Now this will be the total of all of the territories that they currently control, which is a lot. You can do the math if you want to, it's a bunch. And that ends the Americans' turn. That means that this is the end of a complete round of play, and it's time to check for victory. The Allies have 10 victory cities, 3 more than they started with, and according to the standard victory conditions set at the beginning of the game, this means that the Allies have won the game. Time to pop that champagne. And there it is, the whole game in one example. Now that was a lot of work, and we hope you enjoyed it. Again, for our friends that are new to the game, you can leave your questions below, but we highly recommend that you check out the complete how to play video linked in the description. If you can't find your answers there, we'll do our best to clarify any questions in the comments for that video. For my eagle-eyed, experienced Axis and Allies players out there, what did we miss? Because there's no way we thought of everything. Let us know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this one, give us a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button and the bell to never miss a thing. Strategy videos for beginners, intermediate, and advanced players are coming soon. This is Board Game Nation. My name is Gary Blevins. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.